Starting action.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Eventide Tales. I'm Toby Wilson. I'm here to be your host today. We want to thank you all for coming and joining us today, and we have a wonderful slate of stories for you here today. Just wanted to let you know that if you do enjoy what you're seeing here, please take an opportunity to donate to us at www.eventidearts.org. You can give whatever you like. It's $5, $10. It all helps us to it all helps to support what we do here. So we're going to begin now. We have 5 stories for you today and 5 wonderful Cape Cod actors to tell them to you. The first story we're going to hear today is by an English writer named H.H. Munro. H.H. Munro is better known by the pen name Saki and was a British writer whose witty, mischievous, and sometimes macabre stories satirized Edwardian society and culture. He's considered by English teachers and scholars as a master of the short story, and often compared to O. Henry and Dorothy Parker, and he himself was an influence on A.A. Milne, Noel Coward, and P.G. Wodehouse. In this story, Laura, an older woman, speculates on reincarnation. The story will be read by Janet Geistmore.
You're not really dying, are you? Asked Amanda. I have the doctor's permission to live till Tuesday, said Laura. But today is Saturday. This is serious, gasped Amanda. I don't know about it being serious. It is certainly Saturday. Death is always serious. I never said I was going to die. I am presumably going to live off being Laura, but I shall go on being something, an animal of some kind, I suppose. You see, when one hasn't been very good in the life one has lived, one reincarnates into some lower organism. And I haven't been very good when one comes to think of it. I've been petty and mean and vindictive and all that sort of thing when circumstances have seemed to warrant it. Circumstances never warrant that sort of thing, said Amanda hastily. If you don't mind my saying so, observed Laura, Egbert is a circumstance that would warrant any amount of that sort of thing. You're married to him. That's different. You've sworn to love, honor, and endure him. I haven't. I don't see what's wrong with Egbert, protested Amanda. Oh, I dare say the wrongness has been on my part, admitted Laura dispassionately. He has merely been the extenuating circumstance. He made a thin, peevish kind of fuss, for instance, when I took the collie puppies from the farm out for a run the other day. They chased his young brood of speckled Sussex and drove 2 sitting hens off their nests, besides running all over the flower beds. You know how devoted he is to his poultry and his garden. Anyhow, he needn't have gone on about it for the entire evening and then have said, let's say no more about it, just when I was beginning to enjoy the discussion. That's where one of my petty vindictive revenges came in, added Laura with an unrepentant chuckle. I turned the entire family of speckled Sussex into his seeding shed the day after the puppy episode. How could you? Exclaimed Amanda. Oh, it came quite easily, said Laura. 2 of the hens pretended to be laying at the time, but I was firm. And we thought it was an accident. You see, resumed Laura, I really have some grounds for supposing that my next incarnation will be in a lower organism. I shall be an animal of some kind. On the other hand, I haven't been a bad sort in my way, so I think I may count on being a nice animal, something elegant and lively, with a love of fun. An otter, perhaps. I can't imagine you as an otter, Amanda said. Well, I don't suppose you can imagine me as an angel, if it comes to that, said Laura. Amanda was silent. She couldn't. Personally, I think an otter life would be rather enjoyable, continued Laura. Salmon to eat all the year round, and the satisfaction of being able to fetch the trout in their own homes without having to wait for hours till they condescend to rise to the fly you've been dangling before them. An elegant, svelte figure. Think of the otter hounds, interposed Amanda. How dreadful to be hunted and harried and finally worried to death. Rather fun with half the neighborhood looking on. And anyhow, not worse than this Saturday to Tuesday business of dying by inches. And then I should go on to something else. If I had been a moderately good otter, I suppose I should get back into human form of some sort. Probably something rather exotic. An unclothed Nubian boy, I should think. I wish you would be serious, sighed Amanda. You really ought to be if you're only going to live till Tuesday. As a matter of fact, Laura died on Monday. Oh, so dreadfully upsetting, Amanda complained to her uncle-in-law, Sir Lulworth Quay. I've asked quite a lot of people down for golf and fishing, and the rhododendrons are just looking their best. Laura was always inconsiderate, said Sir Lulworth. She was born during Goodwood Week, and an ambassador staying in the house hated babies. She had the maddest ideas, said Amanda. Do you know if there was any insanity in the family? Insanity? No, I never heard of any. Her father lives in West Kensington, but I believe he's sane on all other subjects. She had the idea that she was going to be reincarnated as an otter, said Amanda. One meets with those ideas of reincarnation so frequently, even in the West, said Sir Lulworth, that one can hardly set them down as being mad. And Laura was such an unaccountable person in this life that I should not like to lay down definite rules as to what she might be doing in the afterstate. You think she really might have passed into some animal form? Amanda was one of those who shape their opinions rather readily from the standpoint of those around them. Just then, Egbert entered the breakfast room, wearing an air of bereavement that Laura's demise would have been insufficient in itself to account for. 4 of my speckled Sussex have been killed, he exclaimed. The very 4 that were to go to the show on Friday. One of them was dragged away and eaten right in the middle of that new carnation bed that I've been to so much trouble and expense over. My best flower bed and my best fowls singled out for destruction. It almost seems as if the brute that did the deed had special knowledge of how to be as devastating as possible in a short space of time. Was it a fox, do you think? Asked Amanda. Sounds more like a polecat, said Sir Lulworth. No, said Egbert. There were marks of webbed feet all over the place, and we followed the tracks down to the stream at the bottom of the garden. Evidently, an otter. Amanda looked quickly and furtively across at Sir Lulworth. Egbert was too agitated to eat any breakfast and went out to superintend the strengthening of the poultry yard defences. I think she might have at least waited till the funeral was over, said Amanda in a scandalized voice. It's her own funeral, you know, said Sir Lulworth. It's a nice point in etiquette how far one ought to show respect to one's own mortal remains. Disregard for mortuary convention was carried to further lengths the next day. During the absence of the family at the funeral ceremony, the remaining survivors of the speckled Sussex were massacred. The marauders' line of retreat seemed to have embraced most of the flower beds on the lawn, but the strawberry beds in the lower garden had also suffered. I shall get the otter hounds to come here at the earliest possible moment, said Egbert savagely. Oh, on no account! You can't dream of doing such a thing, exclaimed Amanda. I mean, it wouldn't do so soon after a funeral in the house. It's a case of necessity, said Egbert. Once an otter takes to that sort of thing, it won't stop. Perhaps it will go elsewhere now there are no more fowls left, suggested Amanda. One would think you wanted to shield the beast, said Egbert. There's been so little water in the stream lately, objected Amanda. It seems hardly sporting to hunt an animal when it has so little chance of taking refuge anywhere. Good gracious, fumed Egbert. I'm not thinking about sport. I want to have the animal killed as soon as possible. Even Amanda's opposition weakened when, during church time on the following Sunday, the otter made its way into the house, raided half a salmon from the larder, and worried it into scaly fragments on the Persian rug in Egbert's studio. We shall have it hiding under our beds and biting pieces out of our feet before long, said Egbert. From what Amanda knew of this particular otter, she felt that the possibility was not a remote one. On the evening preceding the day fixed for the hunt, Amanda spent a solitary hour walking by the banks of the stream, making what she imagined to be hound noises. It was charitably supposed by those who overheard her performance that she was practicing for farmyard imitations at the forthcoming village entertainment. It was her friend and neighbor, Aurora Burnett, who brought her news of the day's sport. Oh, pity you weren't out. We had quite a good day. We found it at once in the pool just below your garden. Did you kill it? Asked Amanda. Rather. A fine she-otter. Your husband got rather badly bitten in trying to tail it. Poor beast. I felt quite sorry for it. It had such a human look in its eyes when it was killed. You can call me silly, but do you know who the look reminded me of? My dear woman, what is the matter? When Amanda had recovered to a certain extent from her attack of nervous prostration, Egbert took her to the Nile Valley to recuperate. A change of scene speedily brought about the desired recovery of health and mental balance. The escapades of an adventurous otter in search of a variation of diet were viewed in their proper light. Amanda's normally placid temperament reasserted itself. Even a hurricane of shouted curses coming from her husband's dressing room in her husband's voice, but hardly in his usual vocabulary, failed to disturb her serenity as she made a leisurely toilet one evening in a Cairo hotel. What is the matter? What has happened? She asked in amused curiosity. Why, the little beast has thrown all my clean shirts into the bath. Wait till I catch you, you little... What little beast? Asked Amanda, suppressing a desire to laugh. Egbert's language was so hopelessly inadequate to express his outraged feelings. Why, a naked Nubian boy, sputtered Egbert. And now Amanda is seriously ill.
Thank you, Janet. Our next story is by S.J. Perlman. S.J. Perlman was an American humorist and screenwriter. He's best known for his humorous short pieces written over many years for The New Yorker, but also as a screenwriter, penning the screenplays for the Marx Brothers movies, Monkey Business, and Horse Feathers. And in 1956, he won the Academy Award for his adapted screenplay for Around the World in 80 Days. In this story, Farewell, My Lovely Appetizer, Perlman parodies the work of the Raymond Chandler School of tough, amorous, private eye crime fiction. The story will be read by Cleo Zanning.
Farewell, My Lovely Appetizer by S.J. Perlman. I came down the sixth-floor corridor of the Arbogast building, past the Worldwide Noodle Corporation, Zwingy and Rumsey accountants, and the Ace Secretarial Service, mimeographing our specialty. The legend on the ground glass panel next door said Atlas Detective Agency, Noonan and Driscoll. But Snapper Driscoll had retired 2 years before with a .38 slug between the shoulders, donated by a snowbird in Tacoma, and I owned what goodwill the firm had. I let myself into the crummy anteroom we kept to impress clients, growled good morning at Bertie Claflin. Well, you certainly look like something the cat dragged in, she said. She had a quick tongue. She also had eyes like dusty lapis lazuli, taffy hair, and a figure that did things to me. I kicked open the bottom drawer of her desk, let 2 inches of rye trickle down my craw, kissed Bertie square on her lush red mouth, and set fire to a cigarette. I could go for you, sugar, I said slowly. Her face was veiled, watchful. I stared at her ears. There was lichen the way they were joined to her head. There's something complete about them. You knew they were there for keeps. When you're a private eye, you want things to stay put. Any customers? A woman by the name of Sigrid Bornstein said she'd be back. A looker. Swede? She'd like you to think so. I nodded towards the inner office to indicate I was going in there, and I went in there. I lay down on the Davenport, took off my shoes, and bought myself a shot from the bottle I kept underneath. 4 minutes later, an ash blonde with eyes the color of unset opals, in a Nettie Rosenstein basic black dress and a Baum Martin stole, burst in. Her bosom was heaving, and it looked even better that way. With a gasp, she circled the desk, hunting for someplace to hide, and then, spotting the wardrobe where I keep a change of bourbon, ran into it. I got up and wandered out into the anteroom. Bertie was deep in a crossword puzzle. You seen anybody come in here? No. There was a thoughtful line between her brows. Say, what's a 5-letter word meaning trouble? Swede, I told her, and went back inside. I waited the length of time it would take a small, not very bright boy to recite Ozymandias, and inching carefully along the wall, took a quick gander out the window. A thin galoot with stooping shoulders was being very busy reading a paper outside the Gristiti store 2 blocks away. He hadn't been there an hour ago, but then, of course, neither had I. He wore a size 7 dove-colored hat from Browning King, a tan Wilson Brothers shirt with pale blue stripes, a J-press followed with a mixed red and white figure, dark blue interwoven socks, and an unshined pair of oxblood London character shoes. I let a cigarette burn down between my fingers until it made a small red mark, and then I opened the wardrobe. Hey, the blonde said lazily. You Mike Noonan? I made a noise that could have been yes, and waited. She yawned. I thought things over, decided to play it safe. And I yawned. She yawned back. Then, settling into the corner of the wardrobe, she went to sleep. I lit another cigarette, burned down until it made a second red mark beside the first one, and then I woke her up. She sank into a chair, crossing a pair of gams that tightened my throat as I peered under the desk looking at him. "Mr. Noonan," she said, you've got to help me." "And my few friends call me Mike," I said pleasantly. "Mike," she rolled the syllable on her tongue. "I don't believe I've ever heard that name before. Irish?" "Enough to know the difference between a gossoon and a bassoon." "Well, what is the difference?" she asked. I dummied up. I figured I wasn't giving anything away for free. Her eyes narrowed. I shifted my 200 pounds slightly, lazily set fire to a finger, and watched it burn down. I could see she was admiring the interplay of muscles in my shoulders. Hey, there wasn't any extra fat on Mike Noonan, but I wasn't telling her that. I was playing it safe until I knew where we stood. She spoke again. It came with a rush. "Mr. Noonan, he thinks I'm trying to poison him, but I swear the herring was pink. I took it out of the jar myself. If I could only find out how they tinted it. I offered them money, but they wouldn't tell." Suppose you take it from the beginning," I suggested. She drew a deep breath. "You've heard of the golden spintria of Hadrian?" I shook my head. "It's a tremendously valuable coin, believed to have been given by the Emperor Hadrian to one of his proconsuls, Caius Vitellius. It disappeared about 100 AD and eventually passed into the possession of Hucbald the Fat. After the sack of Adrianople by the Turks, it was loaned by a man named Shapiro to the court physician, or Hakim, of Abdul Mahmud. Then it dropped out of sight for nearly 500 years, until last August, when a dealer in second-hand books named Lloyd Thursday sold it to my husband." "And now it's gone again," I finished. "No," she said. "At least it was lying on the dresser when I left an hour ago." I leaned back, pretending to fumble a carbon out of the desk, and studied her legs again. This was going to be a lot more intricate than I had thought. Her voice got huskier. "Well, last night I brought home a jar of smorgasbits bits for Walter's dinner. You know them? They're small mouth-sized pieces of herring with pinkish tones, aren't they?" Her eyes darkened, lightened, then darkened again. "How did you know?" "Hey, I haven't been a private op 9 years for nothing, sister. Go on." "Well, I knew right away that something was wrong when Walter screamed and upset his plate. I tried to tell him the herring was supposed to be pink, but he carried on like a madman. Oh, he's been suspicious of me since, well, ever since I made him take out that life insurance." "What was the face amount of the policy?" "Well, it was 100,000, but it carried a triple indemnity clause in case he died by seafood. Mr. Noonan, Mike," her tone caressed me. "I've got to win back his confidence. You could find out how they tinted that herring." "What's in it for me?" "Anything you want." The words were a whisper. I leaned over, poked open her handbag, counted off $5 grand. "This'll hold me for a while," I said. "If I need any more, I'll bang my spoon in the high chair." She got up. "Oh, well, I think of it. How does this golden spintria of yours tie in with the herring?" "Oh, it doesn't," she said calmly. "I just threw it in for glamour." She trailed past me in a cloud of scent that retailed at 90 rugs the ounce. I caught her wrist and pulled her up to me. "I go for girls named Sigrid with opal eyes," I said. "Well, Where did you learn my name? I haven't been a private snoop 12 years for nothing, sister. Well, it was 9 last time. It seemed like 12 till you came along. I held the clinch until a faint wisp of smoke curled out of her ears, pushed her through the door. Then I slipped a pint of rye into my stomach and a heater into my kick and went looking for a book dealer named Lloyd Thursday. I knew he had no connection with the herring caper, but in my business, you don't overlook anything. The thin galoot outside of Gristides had taken a powder when I got there. That meant we were no longer playing girls' rules. I had a hack, the Wanamaker's, cut over the 3rd, walked up the 14th. At 12th, a mink-faced Jasper made up as a street cleaner, tailed me for a block, drifted into a dairy restaurant. At 13th, somebody dropped a sour tomato out of a 3rd-story window, missing me by inches. I doubled back to Wanamaker's, hopped the bus up 5th to Madison Square, and switched to a cab down 4th, where the second-hand bookshops elbow each other like dirty urchins. A flabby hombre in a Joe Carbondale rope-knit sweater whose jowl could have used a shave, quit giggling over the heptameron long enough to tell me he was Lloyd Thursday. His shoe-button eyes became opaque when I asked to see any first editions or incunabula relative to the Colpia harengus or your common herring. You got the wrong pitch, copper, he snarled. That stuff is harder than Pee Wee Russell's clarinet. Yeah, well, maybe a sawbuck'll smarten you up, I said. I folded one to the size of a postage stamp and scratched my chin with it. There's 5 yards around for anyone who knows why those smorgasbits of Sigrid Bunstein's happen to be pink. His eyes got crafty. I might talk for $1,000. Start dealing. He motioned toward the back. I took a step forward. Boom! A second later, a Roman candle exploded inside my head, and I went away from there. When I came to, I was on the floor with a lump on my sconce the size of a lapwing's egg, and big Terry Tremaine of homicide was bending over me. Hey, someone snapped me, I said thickly. His name was Webster, grunted Terry. He held up a dog-eared copy of Merriam's Unabridged. You tripped on a loose board and this fell off the shelf on your think tank. Yeah, I said skeptically, then where's Thursday? He pointed to the fat man lying across a pile of erotica. He passed out cold when he saw you cave. I covered up. Let Terry figure it any way he wanted. I wasn't telling him what cards I held. I was playing it safe until I knew all the angles. In a seedy pharmacy off Astor Place, a stale Armenian whose name might have been Bulgarian, but wasn't, dressed my head and started asking questions. I put my knee in his groin and he lost interest, jerking my head toward the coffee urn. I spent a nickel in the next 40 minutes doing some heavy thinking. Then I holed up in a phone booth and dialed a clerk I knew called Little Favel in a delicatessen store on Amsterdam Avenue. It took a while to get the dope I wanted because the connection was bad and Little Favel had been dead for 2 years. But we Noonans don't let go easily. By the time I worked back to the Arbogast building via the Weehawken ferry and the George Washington Bridge to cover my tracks, all the pieces were in place. Or so I thought. Up to the point she came out of the wardrobe, holding me between the sights of her ice blue automatic. Reach for the stratosphere, gumshoe. Sigrid Bunstein's voice was colder than Horace Greeley and Little Favel put together. But her clothes were plenty calorific. She wore a forest green suit of Hockenham woolens, a Knox Wayfarer, and baby crocodile pumps. It was her blouse, though, that made tiny red hairs stand up on my knuckles. Its deep yoke folds, shoulder pads, and shirt band bow could only have been designed by some master craftsman, some Cezanne of the shears. Well, nosy Parker, she sneered, so you found out how they tinted the herring. Yeah, sure, it's grenadine, I said easily. You knew it all along, and you planned to add a few grains of oxybutane cherry phosphate, which turns the same shade of pink in solution, to your husband's portion, knowing it wouldn't show up in the post-mortem. Then you'd collect the 300 G's and join Harry Pestalozzi in Nogales till the heat died down. But you didn't count on me. You? Marguerite nicked her full-throated laugh. What are you going to do about it? This. I snaked the rug out from under her, and she went down in a swirl of silken ankles. The bullet whined by me into the ceiling as I vaulted over the desk, pinioned her against the wardrobe. Oh, Mike! Suddenly all the hatred had drained away, and her body yielded to mine. Don't turn me in. You cared for me once. It's no good, Sigrid. You'd only double-time me again. Try me. Okay, the shirt maker who designed your blouse, what's his name? Huh? A shudder of fear went over her. She averted her head. Hey, he's famous on 2 continents. Come on, Sigrid, they're your dice. Oh, no, I won't tell you. I can't. It's a secret between this department store and me. They wouldn't be loyal to you. They'd sell you out fast enough. Oh, Mike, oh, you mustn't. You don't know what you're asking. For the last time. Oh, sweetheart, don't you see? Her eyes were tragic pools, a cenotaph to lost illusions. I've got so little. Don't take that away from me. I'd never be able to hold my head in russacks again. Well, if that's the way you want to play it. There was silence in the room, broken only by Sigrid's choked sob. Then, with a strangely empty feeling, I uncradled the phone and dialed Spring 73100. For an hour after they took her away, I sat alone in the taupe-colored dusk, watching lights come on, and a woman in the hotel opposite adjusting a garter. Then I treated my tonsils to 5 fingers of firewater, jammed on my hat, and made for the anteroom. Bertie was still scowling over her crossword puzzle. She looked up crookedly at me. You need me any more tonight? Nah. I dropped $1,000 or $2 in her lap. Yeah, buy yourself some stardust. Eh? Yeah, thanks. I got my quota. For the first time, I caught a shadow of pain behind her eyes. Hey, Mike, would you tell me something? Hey, as long as it isn't clean, I flipped to conceal my bitterness. Well, what's an 8-letter word meaning sentimental? Flatfoot, darling, I said, and went out into the rain.
Thank you, Cleo. Our next story is by a young woman named Patricia Marks. She is a staff writer and contributor to The New Yorker since 1989. She's also a former writer for Saturday Night Live and Rugrats, and is the author of several books. Marks was the first woman elected to the Harvard Lampoon and was the recipient of the 2015 Guggenheim Fellowship. In her bio, she claims that she can take a baked potato out of the oven with her bare hands. In her story, Audio Tour, a young woman gets revenge on her ex-boyfriend by turning his apartment into a museum to their relationship while he is away. The story will be read by Susanna Creel.
Audio Tour by Patricia Marks. Hello, and welcome to the rent-stabilized apartment of Todd Nestle. I'm Debbie, a specialist in Todd Nestle, and I'm going to be your guide. Before you begin your journey through the world of Todd Nestle and his stuff, may I ask you to reduce the volume of your Acoustiguide player to a polite level. Todd Nestle does not know that you are here. Moreover, the woman in 12A has been a bee in her bonnet about me ever since I, Debbie, well, okay, yes, a tiny bit drunk, mistook her door for Todd Nestle's late one night and jimmied it open. But that's another acoustic story. You are standing in Todd Nestle's foyer, The faux marble table on your right is attributed to Todd Nestle's mother, circa last Christmas. It's a fine example of a piece that I, Debbie, do not like. Take a moment to look through the mail on the faux marble table. There should be a lot of it because Todd Nestle is away skiing in Vermont with his brother. Is there a letter postmarked Milwaukee? Just curious. Proceed through the foyer and into the living room. In this room, we can see the influence of early Michelle. Notice how Michelle seems to like making bold statements with splashes of color, especially in upholstery. You can tell by the excess of passementerie on the throw pillows that what an incorrigible bitch Michelle is. If you care to pause and look at some of the art and other knickknacks, simply press the red button on your acoustic guide. We will continue at the medicine cabinet in the bathroom of off the master bedroom. To reach the master bedroom, you must traverse the cavernous room on your left. The sole function of that room is to provide a way to the next room. It doesn't seem fair that Todd Nestle pays only $1,100 a month for this spacious 2-bedroom with a dining room, while I, Debbie, happen to know that his income far exceeds the maximum allowed for a tenant in a rent-stabilized apartment. Furthermore, I, Debbie, have heard Todd Nestle say on more than one occasion, "There's tons more closet space here than I know what to do with." And yet I, Debbie, was never offered more than half a drawer, and even that humiliating amount I had to demand. The phone number for the rent info hotline is 718-739-6400. Ask for eligibility violations. Examine the objects in the master bedroom. Here is the famous jar of pennies and the original green shag rug from Todd Nestle's college days. Pay close attention to the black lace brassiere in the bottom drawer of Todd Nestle's bureau. The brassiere, 36D, is not typical of the underwear of Todd Nestle, or of mine, 32B. You may be wondering what the brassiere is doing in this exhibit of the world of Todd Nestle and his stuff. As Todd Nestle's quondam girlfriend, I, Debbie, am wondering this too. Now we're in the bathroom. Actually, don't bother looking through the medicine cabinet. Todd Nestle must have taken all the incriminating artifacts with him to Vermont. Our next stop is the kitchen. Open the refrigerator. The carton of milk dates from the 12th century AD. See the Krebs espresso maker? I, Debbie, gave him that. It cost $249, not including tax. You know what his gift to me, Debbie, for my birthday was? A colander. You will observe that Todd Nestle's apartment has no gift shop. Oh, correction, you are standing in the gift shop. Take the espresso maker. As you help yourself to the professional grade milk frother that I, Debbie, also gave to Todd Nestle, be careful not to step on the creaky floorboard, as it will alert the neighbor downstairs who also has it in for me. She's insane. Besides, I, Debbie, wouldn't even know how to poison the dog. We are now in the commodious coat closet in Todd Nestle's foyer. Our eyes are drawn immediately to the striking composition of the skis and the parka against the back wall. This is a stunning visual statement about a man who is on vacation skiing with his brother, isn't it? Once again, Todd Nestle proves himself to be a master at creating a scenario that elicits powerful emotions, such as hatred and disgust. After you have scrolled through the caller ID log on the phone in the study, looking for Todd Nestle's brother's number to see if Todd Nestle really went to Vermont, place a prank call to Sue Ann Crafso. She lives in Milwaukee, and she's in the book. Please turn to your right. Just past the doorway, you'll see a framed photograph. The subject of this photograph has not been identified with certainty, but Todd Nestle scholars like me, Debbie, believe that it depicts Sue Ann Crafso. Now, go back in the gift shop and get a knife from the drawer next to the sink. When you pry the backing from the picture frame, a photograph of me, Debbie, will be revealed. In the art world, this is called penimento. In the real world, this is called failure to commit and recognize undying love when you have the luck to get it. Compare the two images. Can you discern from the vulgar contours of Sue Ann Crafso's face, the lifeless pallor, the vague gaze, that she is unworthy of even a base miscreant as Todd Nestle? She's also fat. The second image of me, Debbie, on the other hand, shows a woman blessed with keen intelligence and generosity of spirit. It would be unscholarly of me, Debbie, to point out the obvious aesthetic differences, but you, the viewer, can draw your own conclusions. We have come to the end of our retrospective of the world of Todd Nessel and his BS. You can return your Custa guide to the foyer. There is no charge for this tour, but if you enjoyed yourself, call Todd Nessel and tell him so. His number is 212-399-4838, and he can be reached at 3 a.m. He likes pizza, 10 pies at a time, and Rizzo's delivers. I, Debbie, care not what you do with the key.
Thank you, Susanna. Our next story is by William Sidney Porter, who is best known by his pen name, O. Henry. Most of O. Henry's stories are set in his own time, the early 20th century, and many deal, for the most part, with ordinary people, policemen, waitresses, hotel workers, and artists. The Ransom of Red Chief appeared in a 1907 issue of the Saturday Evening Post. It follows two men who kidnap and demand a ransom for the son of a wealthy Alabama family. The kidnapping goes off as planned, but the two criminals suddenly find themselves put in an impossible situation. The story will be read by Stephen Rourke.
The Ransom of Red Chief by O. Henry. Well, it looked like a good thing, but wait till I tell you. We were down south in Alabama, Bill Driscoll and myself, when this kidnapping idea struck us. It was, as Bill afterward expressed it, during a moment of temporary mental apparition. But we didn't find that out till later. There was a town down there, as flat as a flannel cake, and called Summit, of course. It contained inhabitants of as undeleterious and self-satisfied a class of peasantry as ever clustered around a maypole. Bill and me had a joint capital of about $600, and we needed just $2,000 more to pull off a fraudulent town lot scheme in Western Illinois with. We talked it over on the front steps of the hotel. Philoprogenitiveness, says we, is strong in semi-rural communities, and therefore, and for other reasons, a kidnapping project ought to do better there than in the radius of newspapers that send reporters out in plain clothes to stir up talk about such things. We knew that Summit couldn't get after us with anything stronger than constables and maybe some lackadaisical bloodhounds and a diatribe or two in the weekly farmer's budget. So it looked good. We selected for our victim the only child of a prominent citizen named Ebenezer Dorset. The father was respectable and tight, a mortgage fancier and a stern, upright collection plate passer and forecloser. The kid was a boy of 10 with bas-relief freckles and hair the color of the cover of the magazine you buy at the newsstand when you want to catch a train. Bill and me figured that Ebenezer would melt down for a ransom of $2,000 to a cent. But wait till I tell you. About 2 miles from Summit was a little mountain covered with a dense cedar brake. On the rear elevation of this mountain was a cave. There we stored provisions. One evening after sundown, we drove in a buggy past old Dorset's house. The kid was in the street throwing rocks at a kitten on the opposite fence. "Hey, little boy," says Bill, "would you like to have a bag of candy and a nice ride?" The boy catches Bill neatly in the eye with a piece of brick. "That'll cost the old man an extra $500, says Bill, climbing over the wheel. That boy put up a fight like a welterweight cinnamon bear, but at last we got him down in the bottom of the buggy and drove away. We took him up to a cave, and I hitched the horse in the cedar brake. After dark, I drove the buggy to the little village 3 miles away where we had hired it and walked back to the mountain. Bill was pasting court plaster all over the scratches and bruises on his features. There was a fire burning behind the big rock at the entrance to the cave, and the boy was watching a pot of boiling coffee with two buzzard tail feathers stuck in his red hair. He points a stick at me when I come up and says, "Ha, cursed paleface! Do you dare enter the camp of Red Chief, the terror of the plains?" "He's all right now," says Bill, rolling up his trousers and examining some bruises on his shins. "We're playing Indian. We're making Buffalo Bill's show look like magic lantern views of Palestine in the town hall. I'm old Hank, the trapper, Red Chief's captive, and I'm to be scalped at daybreak. By Geronimo, that kid can kick hard." Yes, sir, that boy seemed to be having the time of his life. The fun of camping out in a cave had made him forget that he was a captive himself. He immediately christened me Snake Eye the Spy and announced that when his braves returned from the warpath, I was to be broiled at the stake of the rising sun. Then we had supper, and he filled his mouth full of bacon and bread and gravy and began to talk. He made a during dinner speech something like this: "I like this fine. I never camped out before, but I had a pet possum once, and I was 9 last birthday. I hate to go to school. Rats ate up 16 of Jimmy Talbot's aunt's speckled hen's eggs. Are there any real Indians in these woods? I want some more gravy. Does the trees move and make the wind blow? We had 5 puppies. What makes your nose so red, Hank? My father has lots of money. Are the stars hot? I don't like girls. I whipped Ed Walker twice Saturday. You dasn't catch toads unless with a string. Do oxen make any noise? Why are oranges round? Have you got beds to sleep on in this cave? Amos Murray has got 6 toes. A parrot can talk, but a monkey or a fish can't. How many does it take to make 12? Every few minutes, he would remember that he was a pesky redskin and pick up his stick rifle and tiptoe to the mouth of the cave to rubber for the sounds for the scouts of the hated paleface. Now and then, he would let out a war whoop that made old Hank the trapper shiver. That boy had Bill terrorized from the start. "Red Chief," says I to the kid, "would you like to go home?" "Ah, what for?" says he. "I don't have any fun at home. I hate to go to school. I like to camp out. You won't take me back home again, Snake Eye, will you?" "Not right away," says I. "We'll stay here in the cave a while." "All right," says he. "That'll be fine. I never had such fun in all my life." We went to bed about 11 o'clock. We spread down some wide blankets and quilts and put Red Chief between us. We weren't afraid he'd run away. He kept us awake for 3 hours, jumping up and reaching for his rifle and screeching "Spard!" in mine and Bill's ears, as the fancied crackle of a twig or the rustle of a leaf revealed to his young imagination the stealthy approach of the outlaw band. At last, I fell into a troubled sleep and dreamed that I had been kidnapped and chained to a tree by a ferocious pirate with red hair. Just at daybreak, I was awakened by a series of awful screams from Bill. Now, they weren't yells or howls or shouts or whoops or yops, such as you'd expect from a manly set of vocal organs. They were simply indecent, terrifying, humiliating screams, such as women emit when they see ghosts or caterpillars. It's an awful thing to hear a strong, desperate fat man scream incontinently in a cave at daybreak. I jumped up to see what the matter was. Red Chief was sitting on Bill's chest with one hand twined in Bill's hair. In the other, he had the sharp case knife we used for slicing bacon, and he was industriously and realistically trying to take Bill's scalp, according to the sentence that had been pronounced upon him the evening before. I got the knife away from the kid and made him lie down again. But from that moment, Bill's spirit was broken. He laid down on his side of the bed, but he never closed an eye again in sleep as long as that boy was with us. I dozed off for a while, but along towards sunup, I remembered that Red Chief had said I was to be burned at the stake at the rising of the sun. I wasn't nervous or afraid, but I sat up and lit my pipe and leaned against a rock. "What are you getting up so soon for, Sam?" asked Bill. "Me?" says I. "I got a kind of pain in my shoulder. I thought sitting up would rest it." "You're a liar," says Bill. "You're afraid. You was to be burned at sunrise, and you was afraid he'd do it. And he would too, if he could find a match. Ain't it awful, Sam? Do you think anybody will pay out money to get a little imp like him back home?" "Sure," said I. "A rowdy kid like that is just the kind that parents dote on. Now, you and the chief get up and cook breakfast while I go up on top of this mountain and reconnoiter." I went up on the peak of the little mountain and ran my eye over the contiguous vicinity. Over toward summit, I expected to see the sturdy yeomanry of the village armed with scythes and pitchforks, beating the countryside for the dastardly kidnappers. But what I saw was a peaceful landscape dotted with one man plowing with a dun mule. Nobody was dragging the creek. No couriers dashed hither and yon, bringing tidings of no news to the distracted parents. There was a sylvan attitude of somnolent sleepiness pervading that section of the external outward surface of Alabama that lay exposed to my view. Perhaps, says I to myself, it has not yet been discovered that the wolves have borne away the tender lambkin from the fold. Heaven help the wolves, says I, and I went down the mountain to breakfast. When I got to the cave, I found Bill backed up against the side of it, breathing hard, and the boy threatening to smash him with a rock half as big as a coconut. "He put a red-hot boiled potato down my back," explained Bill, "and then mashed it with his foot, and I boxed his ears. Have you got a gun about you, Sam?" I took the rock away from the boy and kind of patched up the argument. "I'll fix you," says the kid to Bill. "No man ever struck the Red Chief but what he got paid for it, you better beware." After breakfast, the kid takes a piece of leather with strings wrapped around it out of his pocket and goes outside the cave, unwinding it. I dragged Bill out and poured cold water on his head for half an hour. Well, by and by, he sits up and feels behind his ear and he says, "Sam, do you know who my favorite biblical character is?" "Take it easy," says I. "You'll come to your senses presently." "King Herod," says he. "You won't go away and leave me here alone, will you, Sam?" I went out and caught that boy and shook him until his freckles rattled. "If you don't behave," says I, "I'll take you straight home. Now, are you going to be good or not?" "I was only funning," says he sullenly. "I didn't mean to hurt old Hank. But what did he hit me for? I'll behave, Snake Eye, if you won't send me home, and if you let me play the Black Scout today." "Well, I don't know the game," says I. "That's for you and Mr. Bill to decide. He's your playmate for the day. I'm going away for a while on business. Now, you come in and make friends with him and say you are sorry for hurting him, or home you go at once." Now, I made him and Bill shake hands, and then I took Bill aside and I told him I was going to Poplar Cove, a little village 3 miles from the cave, and find out what I could about how the kidnapping had been regarded in Summit. Also, I thought it best to send a peremptory letter to Old Man Dorset that day, demanding the ransom and dictating how it should be paid. "You know, Sam," says Bill, "I've stood by you without batting an eye in earthquakes, fire, and flood, in poker games, dynamite outrages, police raids, train robberies, and cyclones. I never lost my nerve yet till we kidnapped that 2-legged skyrocket of a kid. He's got me going. You won't leave me long with him, will you, Sam?" "I'll be back sometime this afternoon," says I. You must keep the boy amused and quiet till I return. Now, we'll write that letter to old Dorset. Well, Bill and I got paper and pencil and worked on the letter while Red Chief, with a blanket wrapped around him, strutted up and down, guarding the mouth of the cave. Bill begged me tearfully to make the ransom $1,500 instead of $2,000. I ain't attempting, says he, to decry the celebrated moral aspect of parental affection. But we're dealing with humans, and it ain't human for anybody to give up $2,000 for that 40-pound chunk of freckled wildcat. I'm willing to take a chance at $1,500. You can charge the difference to me. So to relieve Bill, I acceded, and we collaborated a letter that ran this way. Ebenezer Dorset, Esquire. We have your boy concealed in a place far from Summit. It is useless for you or the most skillful detectives to attempt to find him. Absolutely, the only terms on which you can have him restored to you are these. We demand $1,500 in large bills for his return. The money to be left at midnight tonight at the same spot and in the same box as your reply, as hereinafter described. If you agree to these terms, send your answer in writing by a solitary messenger tonight at 8:30. After crossing Owl Creek on the road to Poplar Cove, there are 3 large trees about 100 yards apart, close to the fence of the wheat field on the right-hand side. At the bottom of the fence post, opposite the 3rd tree, will be found a small pasteboard box. The messenger will place the answer in this box and return immediately to Summit. If you attempt any treachery or fail to comply with our demand as stated, you will never see your boy again. If you pay the money as demanded, he will be returned to you safe and well within 3 hours. These terms are final, and if you do not accede to them, no further communication will be attempted. 2 desperate men. I addressed this letter to Dorset and put it in my pocket. As I was about to start, the kid comes up to me and says, Snake Eye, you said I could play the Black Scout while you was gone. Well, play it, of course, says I. Mr. Bill will play with you. What kind of game is it? I'm the Black Scout, says Red Chief, and I have to ride to the stockade to warn the settlers that the Indians are coming. I'm tired of playing Indian myself. I want to be the Black Scout. All right, says I, it sounds harmless to me. I guess Mr. Bill will help you foil the pesky savages? What am I to do? Asked Bill, looking at the kid suspiciously. You are the horse, says Black Scout. Get down on your hands and knees. How can I ride to the stockade without a horse? You better keep him interested, said I, till we get the scheme going. Now loosen up. Bill gets down on his all fours, and a look comes in his eye like a rabbit's when you catch it in a trap. How far is it to the stockade, kid? He asks in a husky manner of voice. 90 miles, says Black Scout, and you have to hump yourself to get there on time. Whoa now! The Black Scout jumps on Bill's back and digs his heels in his side. For heaven's sake, says Bill, hurry back, Sam, as soon as you can. I wish we hadn't made the ransom more than 1,000. Say, you quit kicking me or I'll get up and warm you good. I walked over to Poplar Cove and sat around the post office and store, talking with the chawbacons that came in to trade. One whiskerando says that he hears Summit is all upset on account of Elder Ebenezer Dorset's boy having been lost or stolen. That was all I wanted to know. I bought some smoking tobacco, referred casually to the price of black-eyed peas, posted my letter surreptitiously, and came away. The postmaster said the mail carrier would come by in an hour to take the mail on to Summit. When I got back to the cave, Bill and the boy were not to be found. I explored the vicinity of the cave, risked a yodel or two, but there was no response. So I lighted my pipe and sat down on a mossy bank to await developments. In about half an hour, I heard the bushes rustle, and Bill wobbled out into the little glade in front of the cave. Behind him was the kid. stepping softly like a scout with a broad grin on his face. Bill stopped, took off his hat, wiped his face with a red handkerchief. The kid stopped about 8 feet behind him. Sam, says Bill, I suppose you'll think I'm a renegade, but I couldn't help it. I'm a grown person with masculine proclivities and habits of self-defense, but there is a time when all systems of egotism and predominance fail. The boy is gone. I have sent him home. All is off. There was martyrs in old times, goes on Bill, that suffered death rather than give up the particular graft they enjoyed. None of them ever was subjected to such supernatural tortures as I have been. I tried to be faithful to our articles of depredation, but there came a limit. What's the trouble, Bill? I asked him. I was rode, says Bill, the 90 miles to the stockade, not barring an inch. Then, when the settlers was rescued, I was given oats. Sand ain't a palatable substitute. And then for an hour, I had to explain to him why there was nothing in holes, how a road can run both ways, and what makes the grass green. I tell you, Sam, a human can only stand so much. I takes him by the neck of his clothes and drags him down the mountain. On the way, he kicks my legs black and blue from the knees down, and I've got to have 2 or 3 bites on my thumb and hand cauterized. But he's gone, continues Bill, gone home. I showed him the road to Summit, and I kicked him about 8 feet nearer there with one kick. I'm sorry we lose the ransom, but it was either that or Bill Driscoll to the madhouse. Bill is puffing and blowing, but there is a look of ineffable peace and growing content on his rose-pink features. Bill, says I, there isn't any heart disease in your family, is there? No, says Bill, nothing chronic except malaria and accidents. Why? Then you might turn around, says I. Have a look behind you. Bill turns and sees the boy and loses his complexion and sits down plump on the ground and begins to pluck aimlessly at grass and little sticks. For an hour, I was afraid for his mind. And then I told him that my scheme was to put the whole job through immediately, and that we would get the ransom and be off with it by midnight if old Dorset fell in with our proposition. So Bill braced up enough to give the kid a weak sort of smile and a promise to play the Russian in a Japanese war with him as soon as he felt a little better. I had a scheme for collecting that ransom without danger of being caught by counterplots that ought to commend itself to professional kidnappers. The tree under which the answer was to be left, and the money later on, was close to the road fence with big bare fields on all sides. If a gang of constables should be watching for anyone to come for the note, they could see him a long way off crossing the fields or in the road. But no siree, at 8:30, I was up in that tree, as well hidden as a tree toad, waiting for the messenger to arrive. Exactly on time, a half-grown boy rides up the road on a bicycle, locates the pasteboard box at the foot of the fence post, slips a folded piece of paper into it, and pedals away again back towards Summit. Now, I waited an hour and then concluded the thing was square. I slid down the tree, got the note, slipped along the fence till I struck the woods, and was back at the cave in half an hour. I opened the note, got near the lantern, and read it to Bill. It was written with a pen in a crabbed hand, and the sum and substance of it was this. 2 desperate men. Gentlemen, I received your letter today by post in regard to the ransom you ask for the return of my son. I think you are a little high in your demands, and I hereby make you a counter proposition, which I am inclined to believe you will accept. You bring Johnny home and pay me $250 in cash, and I agree to take him off your hands. You had better come at night, for the neighbors believe he is lost, and I couldn't be responsible for what they would do to anybody they saw bringing him back. Very respectfully, Ebenezer Dorset. Great pirates of Penzance, says I. Of all the impudent... But I glanced at Bill and hesitated. He had the most appealing look in his eye I ever saw on the face of a dumb or talking brute. Sam, says he, what's $250 after all? We've got the money. One more night of this kid will send me to a bed in Bedlam. Besides, being a thorough gentleman, I think Mr. Dorset is a spendthrift for making us such a liberal offer. You ain't gonna let the chance go, are you? Tell you the truth, Bill, says I. This little ewe lamb has somewhat got on my nerves too. We'll take him home, pay the ransom, and make our getaway. We took him home that night. We got him to go by telling him that his father had bought a silver-mounted rifle and a pair of moccasins for him, and we were going to go hunt bears the next day. It was just 12 o'clock when we knocked on Ebenezer's front door. Just at the moment when I should have been abstracting the $1,500 from the box under the tree, according to the original proposition, Bill was counting out $250 into Dorset's hand. When the kid found out we were going to leave him at home, he started up a howl like a calliope and fastened himself as tight as a leech to Bill's leg. His father peeled him away gradually like a porous plaster. How long can you hold him? Asks Bill. I'm not as strong as I used to be, says old Dorset, but I think I can promise you 10 minutes. Enough, says Bill. In 10 minutes, I shall cross the central, southern, and middle western states and be legging it trippingly for the Canadian border. And as dark as it was, and as fat as Bill was, and as good a runner as I am, he was a good mile and a half out of Summit before I could catch up with him.
Thank you, Stephen. And we have one more story for you today. This is by George S. Kaufman. George S. Kaufman was an American playwright, theater director, producer, and humorist and drama critic. In addition to comedies and political satire, he wrote several musicals for the Marx Brothers, including The Coconuts and Animal Crackers. He won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama for the musical Of Thee I Sing in 1932, and won it again in 1937 for the play You Can't Take It With You with Moss Hart. This story, School for Waiters, was a New Yorker piece about a secret college that all New York waiters train at. In a vague sort of way, I felt for a long time that the place existed. Several times I tried to pin them down about it, but invariably they denied it. Just didn't know what I was driving at, they said. And then, about 10 days ago, I happened to be talking to Pierre, who bows the customers in and out of the alabaster room. Suddenly, I felt that the moment was ripe. Pierre, I said, I've been going to restaurants for many years, and I've noticed that waiters all have certain little tricks, little ways and means of doing things that generally can be counted on to drive the customer crazy. Well, it seems to me that these little tricks have a certain similarity. They follow a definite pattern, and it's hard to believe that it's accidental. There must be some place where they are taught these things. They couldn't just blunder into them, every one of them. Come on, Pierre. I've known you a long time. Tell me. He hesitated a few seconds, looked around cautiously, and then came a step nearer. Meet me outside the restaurant at midnight, he whispered. Wear a plain dark suit. Needless to say, I was at the rendezvous on time. Pierre appeared almost instantly. With a nod, he beckoned me to follow him. At the corner, he motioned me into a cab. The drivers started off with no word of instruction. Pierre produced a blindfold and fastened it around my head. I am sorry to do this, he said, but you will understand. We rode for about 10 minutes in silence. Then we were stopped. Pierre helped me out of the cab and we crossed the sidewalk and went down 3 or 4 steps. There was a clank of chains and the sound of a heavy door opening. Then a coarse voice said, well, Pierre gave what was evidently the password. Sauce maison, he said. Then he took off my blindfold. For a moment, I could see nothing. I heard the sound of the chains again as they dropped back into place, and then vaguely, I discerned another door in front of me. Do not speak, said Pierre. Just watch. The door opened. What met my eyes was merely a restaurant, or at least it seemed to be a restaurant. Gleaming tables, waiters and captains, velvet rope. Outside the rope, about a dozen men and women in evening clothes were standing, although the restaurant itself was empty. Why don't they let them sit down? I whispered to Pierre. Shh, they are not customers. They are merely hired for the waiters to practice on. Suddenly, he pointed to a tall, distinguished figure who had just emerged from the side door. Professor Ziegler, he whispered, head of the school, trained abroad. I looked at Ziegler with interest. He was handsome, impassive, and had eyes that could look through one to the wall. He snapped his fingers. Immediately, a couple in evening clothes detached themselves from the group and were admitted inside the rope. A captain came forward to meet them. Yes, sir, said the captain to the man in evening clothes. Ziegler winced. No, no, he cried. Yes, sir, is never used at this point. It would make too much sense. Yes, sir, is said only when filling the water glass or putting down a plate. That is the time you say yes, sir, when it can't possibly mean anything at all. Right now, you look carefully at the lady and the gentleman for about 5 seconds. Then you say, 2? No, but I can see there are 2, said the captain. Why do I ask him such a silly question? Idiot, sputtered Ziegler. The single word 2 used in this moment has several possible meanings, all designed to aggravate the customer. I can mean, for example, you piker, you. If you were anybody of consequence, anybody with money, you would certainly bring 6 to 8 people along, not just a lousy one. Phooey! Or it can mean just 2, eh? I suppose I know what you're after, you little sneak. Just you and that girl. What are you up to with her anyhow? See what I mean? Or else it can imply that although there are only 2 people standing there, the customer is planning to smuggle 3 or 4 more in behind your back. So this is by way of warning him that you are on guard against any chicanery. You better not try anything. The customer may accept any one of these meanings. It doesn't matter, because all of them are calculated to unsettle him just a trifle upon entering. That is the purpose. Ziegler paused for a moment and waited for this to sit in. All right, the customer is seated. I will show you now how to get the order wrong. Of course, it would be a simple thing for the waiter to take the order and personally tell the man who is going to prepare it. But with that method, it would come out right entirely too often. We have a different system. Let me have a captain, an assistant captain, a waiter, a chef, and an assistant chef. Line up! In a few seconds, the 5 men were in line. These men have worked with me before, said Ziegler, and understand the system. Let the lady order a dish. Anything. Don't worry. You won't get it. Breast of guinea hen under glass, said the lady. Good, said Ziegler. Now, each of the men will pass the order on to the next man, and we will see what it becomes. Remember to speak rapidly and unintelligibly. Breast of guinea hen under glass, said the first man. Quick, commanded Ziegler. breast of glass under guinea hen, said the second man. Best glasses should be brought in again, murmured the third man. There was a pause. Quick! What did he say? Called the impatient Ziegler. I couldn't understand him, said the fourth man. Of course you couldn't. Make something up, quick! A hamburger. Next man. A ham sandwich. Good! This from Ziegler again. The lady orders breast of guinea hen under glass and receives a ham sandwich. Exceptionally good. He actually smiled for a moment, then immediately turned businesslike again. Class in point killing, he called. I will dispense with the little things, such as moving a glass 1/10 of an inch for no reason at all. Point killing, please. The gentleman will tell the lady a story, any story. A man at the table picked up at once. He was obviously experienced. It seems to me that out of the racetrack the other day, a horse came up to the $2 window and said, I want to bet on myself in the third race. The man at the window was pretty surprised. What's that you said? He asked. What's the matter? Asked the horse. Are you surprised that I can talk? No, said the man. I'm surprised that instantly a waiter cut in. Oysters for madame? He asked. Fine, said Ziegler. Not only does it kill the story, but the oysters are not for madame at all. They are for the gentleman who ordered clams. He stopped for a second and took a breath. I do not want to give you too much in one session, he said, but I would like to say a few words about vision blocking. This is a science that really cannot be taught to you. This is a science. It requires an instinct. You either have it or you haven't. Let me have a beautiful girl and a homely woman. They were provided at once. Ziegler crossed with them to the other side of the room. Sit here, he said to the girl. You wait a moment, to the woman. Then he came back to the diners at the first table. All right, he said to the man, you know what to do. The man turned to his companion and said, look at that pretty girl over there. Isn't she pretty? Right over there. With the first spoken word, Ziegler made a quick move. In an instant, he was standing squarely in front of the pretty girl. Oh, dear, said the man. That waiter is right in front of her. Oh, he'll move in a second. Ziegler made a lightning gesture toward the homely woman. In a flash, the pretty girl was out of her seat and the other woman had taken her place. You see, said Ziegler. Now I move. The entire room burst into applause. Ziegler bowed. And now then, he said, class in avoiding the diner's eye. I want to thank you all very much for coming today. I want to also thank my actors, Stephen Rourke, Cleo Zanni, Janet Geismore, and Susanna Creel. Thank you very much for being here. We always enjoy doing this, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.